Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm good, Amy. How are you?
Good, good. I'm Amy Epstein Gluck, and you are my partner, Eric Meyer. We're at the law firm Fisher-Broyles. And such a big day today, huh, Eric?
Yeah, yeah, we got a lot to talk about. We're
Yeah,
less than 24 hours removed as we're recording this on Wednesday night. Less than 24 hours removed from the big Brian Flores lawsuit against the National Football League and the Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants and the Denver Broncos. And
yes,
we wanted to talk about it. And
yes, yes.
there's a lot to talk about, but I think to keep this less than an hour and keep this, you know, to something that people can take in easily pretty quickly, we wanted to put on our management side lawyer hats and focus on the complaint itself and what we thought of it. Is it something that has a chance to eventually make it all the way to trial, or is it something that's going to get bounced right away when the defendants file a motion to dismiss?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess
How
perhaps, Amy,
many?
you should want to give the folks a little background on kind of what the complaint's about.
Sure, sure. And Eric, just so I know, how many people brought this complaint to your attention in the last 24 hours?
Oh, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
including my parents, right?
Mhm.
So, what is the complaint about? The complaint starts out with a pretty salacious text exchange that Brian Flores was not meant to see. Brian Flores was interviewing for a coaching position, and he's alleging systemic racism throughout the NFL and among the 32 teams, none of which are owned by people of color, all of whom are owned by white people. Um, he alleges he was subjected to race discrimination and treated differently because of his race, because he was fired after two winning seasons with the Miami Dolphins, which is the first time that had happened since 2003. And as somebody who's from Miami, it's like, wow, two winning seasons. He was subjected to a sham interview with the New York Giants. When he says sham interview, what he's trying to say is the Giants had already made up their minds about who they were going to hire as the head coach. But they went through with interviewing him in order to show that they were complying with what's called the Rooney Rule, which we'll get into, I'm sure. And he's looking to compile a class action of similarly situated individuals who have sought head coach or general manager positions on one of the NFL teams, because it seems the complaint alleged a pretty interesting set of statistics that whereas 70% of the NFL players are Black, it's a much, 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 much smaller percentage of head coaches and general managers and people who are trying to climb the ladder in coaching in general. Just tends to be a very white, higher level, higher tier within the NFL, according to the complaint. I thought it was interesting that they included arrays of photos of who had been head coaches over the years. So generally, the complaint alleges violations of what's called Section 1981, discrimination based on race, for discrimination based on the New York State human rights law, discrimination based on the New York City human rights law, and because the NFL is headquartered in New Jersey, I believe.
It's just as to the Giants. So the Giants play their games in East Rutherford. So there's a claim under the New Jersey law against discrimination against the Giants only. The other claims are against all four defendants.
Yes, yes. And I found it interesting that not included was our account for retaliation, which is, as we know, as both of us have written many times in our respective blogs, it's so much easier to prove retaliation, often more easy than the underlying complaint. It's a much lower standard. And this here is a much higher standard, especially in the last couple of years with the 2020 Supreme Court decision, which I will also talk about. So what did you think about it?
Well, I think from reading it, it paints a pretty sad picture of the state of affairs in the National Football League. And the purpose of this video isn't to say one way or another whether Brian Flores was the victim of discrimination. It's possible he was, it's possible he wasn't. However, he is the lead plaintiff. So in terms of can he advance his claims of discrimination against these 4 defendants, I looked at what's pled in the complaint. And I tried to compartmentalize the claims against each of the defendants, the Broncos, the Dolphins, the Giants, and the National Football League. Should we talk about the 4 different defendants and the claims made against them and what we think of those claims based on what's in the complaint? Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So to me, the defendant that has the best chance of getting out of this case right away is the Denver Broncos. It's not even close. In fact, I struggle to see how a claim of discrimination against the Denver Broncos is pled in good faith. It's close because the sum total of the allegations against the Denver Broncos are that the general manager, John Elway, and another representative to the team showed up for a job interview to interview Mr. Flores for a head coaching job in 2019, and they appeared to be either hungover or coming off a night of partying, and it didn't appear as if they took the interview very seriously.
Right.
And Mr. Flores was not hired for the job. That is the sum total of the facts that are pled in the complaint. And from that, he claims race discrimination.
Right.
They did ultimately hire a white male head coach. However, those are the allegations.
Well,
and in order to plead a claim of race discrimination at this early stage in the complaint, you've got to show that you're a member of a certain protected class here, African American, Black, that you're qualified for the job, and we'll assume that Mr. Flores was qualified to be the head coach of the Broncos, that he suffered an adverse employment action. He did, he wasn't hired. But then there have to be some facts that raise an inference of race discrimination. And to me, showing up a little bit out of sorts to an interview and not getting hired and having the job go to a white male, you got to plead more than that. That's just not enough to me. So I think the Broncos get out of this case pretty early, unless there are new facts that can be alleged in, let's say, an amended complaint.
Yeah, we'll see. I think they're relying on discovery a bit too much as to the Broncos. And now, what about the New York Giants, which I have to confess is my father's beloved team? Mm-hmm. Where are the allegations there? They say that the Giants, had the chance to hire Mr. Flores, and instead, they subjected him to this sham interview with the Giants' new general manager at the end of January, knowing that the Giants had already selected a white coach, right? And then they made him sit through the interview for a job that he knew he would not get because of an text exchange that New England's Patriots coach Bill Belichick had mistakenly disclosed to Mr. Flores. And those texts are just making their way through social media like wildfire, don't you think?
Yeah, so Bill Belichick, according to the complaint, emails Mr. Flores on the 24th, saying effectively, congratulations, I hear you're getting the job. And they text a little bit back and forth, and finally, Mr. Flores says to Mr. Belichick, "Coach, did you mean this to go to me?" And Bill Belichick realizes that he meant to send this text message to Brian Daboll, who, according to Mr. Flores, had already gotten the job as of that text message exchange on the 24th, and Mr. Flores was set to interview with the Giants after that. So that's why he thinks it's a sham interview. Now, What he doesn't plead in the complaint was that the Giants interviewed 6 people to become the head coach, half of whom are African American. Now,
how do you know that, Eric?
I went on the Giants website and it gives a list of everyone they interviewed and when they interviewed them. Now,
I love it.
Another thing that plays in favor of Mr. Flores is that many of the interviews of the white applicants were earlier on, and many of the interviews with the African American applicants were later on. So assuming that what's pled in the complaint is true and that the Giants had decided as of the 24th to hire a white coach, and that his interview after that meant nothing, I think there's probably enough pled there to get past a motion to dismiss. And if not, I think they could beef it up a little bit to get past a motion to dismiss for the Giants.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's going to be this is definitely one to watch. And then we have the Miami Dolphins, right? We have the Miami Dolphins, and it was 3 seasons, not 2. I'm sorry about that. So Mr. Flores was the head coach for 3 seasons from 2019 to 2021, right? And then the complaint alleges that the owner was unhappy, not because it was underperforming, but because the owner wanted Mr. Flores to tank the season so that to put the team in position to secure the first pick in the draft. I don't know about you, but I don't know football. I don't know what that means, that if Mr. Flores tanked the season, that would help with the draft. But assuming that makes sense, Mr. Flores said, well, he wouldn't throw games, and because of that, he was fired. Now, what I don't hear in this complaint, in these allegations, are anything based on race.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crappy thing to do, if true, to fire someone because they won't tank, right?
Yeah.
And supposedly the next season, the owner, according to the complaint, set up a kind of a not so coincidental meeting where Coach Flores would have bumped into an unnamed free agent quarterback
on the yacht.
Rumor has it today is Tom Brady, to meet up with Tom Brady and convince him to come to the Miami Dolphins, and Flores wouldn't do that. So if he's fired,
right?
I'm sorry?
It's quarterback tampering. It's tampering with league rules.
Yeah. Quarterback tampering, tanking games, and supposedly, according to the complaint, paying the coach $100,000 per game he lost. The Dolphins lost. Those are separate problems that maybe the National Football League is going to want to investigate. But if those were the reasons that he was fired, that has nothing to do with race.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So I think that Mr. Flores and his lawyers have their work cut out for them, at least for now. I think that the complaint has, a lot of history in it and tries to really address systemic racism. And of course, we're not saying that doesn't exist. What I'm saying is I think that the descriptions and the history is trying to take the place of some specific allegations. And I think the plaintiff is going to have a hard time getting through a motion to dismiss on this issue, especially since it's a but-for standard. The race discrimination claims under Section 1981, a plaintiff bears the burden of showing that the plaintiff's race was a but-for cause of its injury. But for the plaintiff's race, the action never would have happened. And that burden remains constant throughout the lawsuit, not just throughout the lawsuit, including during this initial pleading stage. So I really think they're going to have their work cut out for them here.
I think so too. Well, Amy, this was fun. This was a lot better than writing up a blog post today. I hope people who watch this enjoy it.
Wait. You know what? Let's talk about the Rooney Rule. Let's talk about the Rooney Rule for a second.
Fair enough.
And why the sham interview issue is such an issue. So the Rooney Rule required NFL teams to interview at least one Black person in connection with any head coach vacancy.
It has to be in person and it has to be outside of the organization.
Right.
So
Oh,
for
really?
example, so for example, the New York Giants, they interviewed their own defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, who's African-American, for the head coaching job. But that wouldn't satisfy the Rooney Rule because Patrick Graham was part of the organization. They also interviewed Leslie Frazier from the Bills, African-American, but that was via teleconference. So that wouldn't necessarily satisfy the Rooney Rule. But Brian Flores did satisfy the Rooney Rule because he's outside of the organization, former Dolphins head coach, and interviewed in person.
Got it. Got it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And I would not be surprised if we saw an amended complaint sooner than later. What do you think about the fact that Mr. Flores is seeking injunctive relief? I mean, to get an injunction in order to do the things that he is demanding, I don't know. Do you think it rises to the standard of an injunction?
Well, the standard for an injunction is he's going to have to establish, among other things, one, a likelihood of success on the merits, which I think, as we just discussed, is difficult. I don't think a judge would look at this and go, it's likely that Mr. Flores, Brian Flores, is going to prevail in this case. It may be plausible that he has claims, but is he going to succeed? I think that's a big step. The other issue is injunctive relief is you have to show irreparable harm. So, if the court enters an injunction, I'm not sure what the injunction would even establish, right? You can't force a team to hire someone. But if the court enters an injunction, Mr. Flores has to first show that he and the other class members would suffer irreparable harm otherwise. Plus, the balance of interest has to be in his favor, and there's some other factors like that. But I don't see an injunction coming, not in the short term.
I think it's very policy oriented, his request for injunctive relief. He's asking to increase the influence of Black individuals in hiring and termination decisions for high levels, to ensure diversity of ownership by creating and funding a committee dedicated to sourcing Black investors, ensure diversity of decision-making in other areas, and increasing objectivity of hiring and termination decisions for high-level positions within the NFL. I think that this is a very policy-focused demand, and I don't know that a lawsuit is really how to get what Mr. Flores is seeking.
I think to get what he is seeking, this lawsuit will serve as a vehicle outside of the courts to engage the National Football League, engage the media, to put pressure on the National Football League to improve diversity, inclusion, and other ways to increase minority, I don't want to say participation, but to get more minorities hired into head coaching positions, into general manager positions. I mean, if that's the goal here, then I think that could very well happen, but it's going to happen outside of the courtroom. And it's a good goal. I mean, that's fine. That's great.
Right. Very interesting. Well, as it is Black History Month, and I don't think that that's an accident, and indeed the complaint mentioned the fact that it was filed on the first day of Black History Month, I'll be very interested to see how this claim proceeds. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll be back with an update. This isn't the last time we'll be talking about this, for sure.
Yes. Well, thank you for saving me from having to find a free photo to go with the blog I would have written, saying some of these same things. And it was such a pleasure to talk to you about this.
You as well. And folks, if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll be back eventually with another one, I'm sure, talking about Brian Flores' lawsuit with the NFL. Bye.
Good night.